And we're live. Hi. So today
Hello.
it's Sarah from Screen Pages, and we're welcoming you to episode 8 of Useful Strategies to Combat Disruption. And today I am joined by Colin from Avalara. Colin, I'll let you introduce yourself and Avalara because you'll do a better job than me.
Well, I'd actually really love to hear you try it, but how about if I do it and then you could repeat, see how well I do. So Avalara, we are a company that specializes in the automation of indirect tax. All companies, when they grow to a certain size, will eventually have to adhere to and comply with tax laws in countries in which they sell in. So Avalara provides automated solutions to simplify the entire process, from the calculation of how much tax is owed on any particular transaction, all the way to how do I file those returns, and finally, how do I actually pay those taxes into the governments that require them. And Sarah, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Colin Stansbury. I'm one of the strategic alliance managers here, and I work with companies such as Screen Pages and many others to help provide the tip of the spear and the bridge between you as a partner and then Avalara as a whole.
Okay, great. So I've got a few questions for you today. The one I'd like to start with is there's been a whole load of information from different governments across the world about how companies can defer their taxes to help with the sort of, financial disruption of COVID-19 and all of that. And so I'm a British citizen. I live in the UK. It's easy for me to quickly find out what the government can do for me in the UK. But if I'm a merchant selling worldwide, it's a mess. So how can your sort of platform help with that?
Yeah, I think a mess is the politest word that we could use on a public broadcast. It's far more than that. And if you speak to some of my colleagues, I will tell you just what a cluster it can be. But that's a great point, right? How do I know how much indirect tax I'm owed at any particular juncture or in any transaction? So what I suppose it's important to break down here is what makes up a transaction, what determines whether or not it's vatable or sales taxable, right? So the five cornerstones is what is it, where are you selling, when are you selling it, how much, and how many, right? And those five are the cornerstones of any particular transactions. In the States in particular, it's very important to know all of those, as in peacetime, as I like to call it, or normal time. Those are what will determine where you have to register for sales tax in any given state. But what do you do about it right now if you're as an international business? Well, the reality is that all of these governments, if you are registered in them, will give you this advice freely. Right? They'll go out and they'll say, "Hey, listen, there are VAT deferments like in the UK or in Germany or in Spain." And they'll say, okay, you need to pay your VAT at this particular juncture. We'll still want you to file returns, which all countries are. They're still wanting you to actually file the returns appropriately, but they're saying you don't have to remit the VAT until later on. What our platform does is our platform provides any international merchant with the power of VAT and sales tax speciality. Right. So will you hire us as an outsource or as a third party system, and we will be able to manage how much tax you need to pay, as well as manage, okay, here's the filing of that tax. And also, you actually don't have to pay until June, for example. So so Avalara, what we are is we provide the solutions to remove the bottlenecks, reduce the risk, and increase the productivity of any team when it comes to selling internationally. And today, where we sit right now, that couldn't be more important with all businesses around the world focused on, hey, how do I stay afloat? How do I manage my workflow? And finally, how do I stay on the right side of compliance when the world resets itself?
Yeah, and I guess it would also help in some instances with cash flow.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Tax is kind of like a trickle down, right? It affects everything, every part of the business, regardless of how much you try to avoid it. And when it comes to actually, and I'm sure that you've spoken, and I have seen, your 7 previous episodes. I've seen many a partner talk about, how how automation is the way of the future. And, we talk about cash flow, right? We talk about how do I manage what my employees are doing and how do I simplify and accelerate their benefit to my company? Well, taking something like indirect tax, which has no value whatsoever. You're either compliant or you're fraudulent. There's absolutely nothing in the middle. And tax and fraud are not 2 words you want in any kind of sentence, right? So
tax evasion is wrong. Tax avoidance is not. What is that?
Yeah.
How it goes?
Well, exactly. Well, I love that you're bringing this up, Sarah, because the funny thing about that is there are so many changes that are occurring to tax at the moment. The landscape is actually, this is going to sound bonkers, but it's really interesting, right? Tax is politics. Tax is the way that politicians pay for the things they promise in their election campaigns, right? And indirect tax is the lowest hanging fruit. So it's the easiest one for them to grab. It's a tax on a transaction. In the EU, it's pretty flat rated. In the US, more complicated, but we can talk about that later. And just as we've seen in this crisis right here, the lowest hanging fruit is the first thing they defer off and say, hey, listen, okay, let's hold off on that. And when the world resets itself, it's going to be the first thing they grab, right? So, I mean, I'll give you a brief example, and I'll keep it engaging as much as I can. So in both the US and in the EU, they've introduced new electronic filing legislations and marketplace facilitator laws, which make it harder for companies to commit VAT fraud or VAT avoidance, as you so cleverly put it. And it means, check this out, right? It means any company is requiring technology to take those transactions and send them to the HMRC's website, to the German VAT office's site, without actually filling out forms. So it completely removes the ability of companies to fudge around their reports and be able. Yeah, well, it is. I mean, they do it for a reason, right? There's 150 billion euros worth of a VAT gap here in Europe as it stands today. And in the United States, it's an equivalent amount in dollars. So they're all trying to say, okay, again, we're talking low hanging fruit, right? They're all talking like, okay, if we just insist that they file electronically, Bosch bring it in. And in the US, if we expand the parameters of who is liable for sales tax, then all of a sudden we've got many more fruits in which to grab and to fill our coffers.
Interesting. So have you guys, because you guys have clients all over the world and most of them are selling, I guess, globally, which is why they need your software. What sort of trends have you noticed within your client base? In terms of, how they've been affected by, either increased orders, decreased orders, that sort of thing?
Well, it's funny that you should mention that. And everyone's got a different story, right? So I talked to some retailers, like some of my fashion brands, and they completely focus on just getting in revenue, right? So they've gone to some of our partners and they've gone, okay, how do I get loyalty increased? How do I increase the ability to send out mass marketing to our audiences? How do I get more engagement? Well, others have actually gone more into like a hibernation when they're tucking in, they're going, you know what? We're just going to prepare ourselves for when this is over. And when we come out, we're going to go out swinging. We've got, for my money, the most successful companies out there are the ones who are still doing well, and they've thought up to themselves, okay, right, we got to think about how I can maximize my product's value and its its actual addressable market, right? So what is the easiest way to do that? The easiest way to do it is to expand internationally, right? Is to go, okay, when the world resets itself, the logistics will still be able to handle things. And all of a sudden you'll get people from all over the world looking to buy and to re-engage in society and re-engage in life. It's a bit dramatic, but kind of that's how it feels, right? So the best thing to do is, okay, let's get ourselves into Germany. Let's get ourselves into China. Let's get ourselves into the United States. Let's start laying the foundations of this international expansion. So when the time comes to pull the trigger, we've got the ability to do so and thus have a massive amount of potential new customers in which to engage.
Yeah, and I guess that it's interesting actually, because the other reason why automation is useful in that respect is because some of these merchants have had to furlough some of their staff, where they may have had very manual processes before. They need to, sort of deal with all of these issues with fewer staff. So automation is kind of key. The only slight issue there that we found with some of our merchants is that they don't have the cash flow to invest in automating these things. And so it's kind of like a chicken and egg. They know they need to do it, and they know they need to invest to sort of come out of this swinging, but they're sort of keeping their cash to survive. They're just in survival mode.
Yeah, and that's what you would do too, Sarah, if you were in that position, isn't it? At the end of the day, the most important thing for any company should be its employees, right? Followed quickly by its customers, right? How do you be able to manage everybody's expectations and keep everybody happy? Luckily today, or recently, we saw the Chancellor of the Exchequer announce an extension of the furlough scheme, which is great. It means that people will feel a lot more confident in being able to hold on to key staff and then to not make those redundancies as we were all predicting. But the thing is with cash flow and the chicken and the egg is I completely understand, and we're very lucky that we're in a position where we're in renewals, right? So most of our business is made up of that. So we're able to continue on and not furlough our staff. But our entire goal is to ensure that if a client or if a partner wants to go international and they want to see that expansion, that we are there and prepared to help them to simplify that very end of the commerce process, right? Yeah. And that's the thing that people almost always forget. It's about, okay, tax is great, but the few times that you think about taxes when you get a knock on the door and a nasty letter through the letterbox saying that, oh, unfortunately, the state of Wisconsin wants to speak to you, or the German Federation is not very happy with your VAT over the past 6 months. So for what we've seen and for what, we at Avalara are experiencing is that, we're here for when everybody wants it. But as I'm sure that it's the same where people are keeping their cards pretty close to the chest.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So what we're actually doing with a lot of our clients is we're sort of saying, okay, well, you haven't got any money to invest at the moment, but what can you do with, instead of furloughing all of your staff, let's say you have a lot of high street retail outlets, you furlough all of those. Why don't you sort of try and use some of that, repurpose some of that staff so you can keep them engaged, motivated, interested into looking into how you can sort of invest in your only source of revenue currently, which is in some cases their website. So it's not just about automation, it's also about people. And I think the businesses that will do the best will be the ones that have a combination of both, really.
I can imagine you saying this from a sermon and a beam of light comes down on you at this exact point in time, James Brown singing in the background, that you were completely right. And you mentioned in the previous statement, the depth of the manual process. That's something you and I have talked about offline. And that's something that I thoroughly believe is going to be the case, where when the world, when companies take a good hard look at their ingoings and their outgoings, they're going to say, okay, this person is currently doing this task and it's taking up this amount of time, and this amount of time is costing us this much. However, automation could come in here and then not replace the person, but replace the task and reallocate the person to a task that's actually, money generating, revenue generating activities, which is great. And again, for us at Avalara, like I said before, we're speaking about how we can help finance teams and e-commerce managers to simplify the way that they sell their goods across borders, right? Because no one wants to learn German to fill out a German VAT return, and no one wants to learn Latvian to fill out a Latvian VAT return, right? But so you say this, for example, you got 3 people in a finance team, and they're selling to the United States, and every single month, one of them has got to be responsible for correlating all the returns and then filing them, right? That person could also be working on their month end, right, or their quarter end, and allocating all their transactions and all of their profits in gross margins, right? But unlike unlike corporation tax or any kind of business taxes, right, where there's here's compliant, here's fraudulent, right? There's quite a bit in between. Again, with VAT sales tax, there's nothing. So you never hear the VAT or indirect tax team being congratulated in a company-wide email, saying, "Well done, you filed your returns on time. We did great. Well done, us." It's like, well done for doing your jobs. On to the next one, buddy. You got the corporate tax boys who are all the glory hunters. But the fact is that instead of replacing the person who's doing it, that person obviously is skilled in finance or it has a job for a reason. Reallocate them to something that'll save you money and make you money, and then automate, reduce risk, reduce the bottlenecks, and then finally increase your productivity. And that's what we mean by the death of the manual process. And we're delighted to be working with companies like yourself to be able to spread that message out, and hopefully help people understand that, while there are a lot of complications in the world at the moment, managing your income, managing your indirect tax, well, it doesn't have to be one of them.
Yeah, and I guess also it plays to the fact that it allows, if you have the right sort of automation tools and software for your staff, they can be productive wherever they are, and they don't necessarily have to be office-based, which is something else that we're noticing a lot. The companies that are doing well are the ones that have adjusted very well to working at home.
Oh yeah. And we've all heard about, I'm sure you, like myself, have been watching the news periodically, because if I watch it too much, I go into a deep spiraling depression. But periodically watching it about, getting people back into an office, about how we're going to have social distancing. Now we're going to have to be wearing face masks, right? And what does an essential worker for a company actually mean? If you cannot work from home, do it from there. And and that's why you and I we're technological evangelists, right? We believe in the power of automation. I'm sure everyone who's watching this right now, is singing from our same hymn sheet as well. But we just got to be so careful nowadays, right? The world is going to change, it's definitively, right? And as a millennial, it's the second in a generation recession that I get to deal with, which is it's great fun. Great.
I don't know what it's like being a millennial. I'm too old for that.
I don't know about that, mate. I don't know about that. But at the same time, you're just gonna look at Experian or look at any of these credit ratings and just go, oh, there that goes.
So if somebody wanted to sort of get some advice about how to, because we've had a few merchants recently start to inquire. They're getting orders from internationally, but they haven't really focused on it. So this has been a chance for them to rethink and think about how can they can expand their market. So if what's the best way of them to sort of get in touch with Avalara to sort of find out how your platform can help?
Well, I love that point, Sarah, and it's really interesting because not all international expansion is done consciously or done by a plan, right? Having merchants go onto your site and purchase goods or services from you can trigger these obligations, can mean that all of a sudden you wake up one day without an obligation. The next day you get 35,000 K worth of orders from France, and you're like, oh dear, now I need to adjust to my new reality. How do they get in touch? Well, it's pretty simple. Just look for Colin Stansbury, look for me. And I'm sure we'll have a link to some of our some of the deferments and some of the tax VAT measures and sales tax measures that we mentioned at the beginning of this cast. And I'll put my email up on there as well. Avalara, what we do is we provide guidance to any and all companies that need it. And we look to ensure that you guys all have a simplified and straightforward messaging around your indirect tax, because again, it's right or it's wrong. And then we'll provide, if it is something that you need, we'll show you some solutions that'll simplify the heck out of it.
Brilliant. So just to finish up, I'm conscious of the time.
How are we doing?
We're doing
good on the time?
Yeah. All right, we're doing okay. I'd like to always finish these fireside chats with a more personal question, which is, can you get...
Are you sure?
So what have been the highs and the lows for you with this whole lockdown? And please share what you're comfortable sharing. Keep the rest to yourself.
Well, right. Well, the positive, let's start with the negatives, right? So the negatives are I live alone, which is not very fun. I'm a hyper extrovert, which has not been very fun. I've crocked my knee, which has not been very fun. It turns out I hate myself, which isn't very fun. You know when they say take a good hard look in the mirror and tell me what you see? Yeah, I've already broken my mirror. I'm just leaving that over there. That stays there. Yeah. But no. The good bits have been, being able to reconnect with my partners has been really lovely. People have got lots of time, and it's great to get to know people on a personal level as well as just on a professional one. And the thing I'm so grateful for is I'm above ground. Every day above ground's a good day, especially when you consider the world happening around you. There's so many things to be grateful for and positive for. And it's not always the easiest to do so, but, we all have our periods of our ups and our downs. And if we can just get on with it, everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, well, then it's not the end.
Well, it'll just be different, won't it?
Exactly.
We need to embrace the change.
Yes, we do. And the world is changing around us, even though it feels like we're stuck inside. The world is still spinning around at thousands of feet a second. And we are going to wake up to a new reality once lockdown finishes, that we need to focus on how we're going to have the most nimble, agile, and businesses that are able to respond to global trends and events quicker than ever before.
Yeah, no, it's all good.
How are you?
I'm okay. I have my good moments and my bad moments. I haven't decided I hate myself yet.
It'll come.
But I've done more DIY in the past 2 months than I would care to say. I'm over it.
Yeah, bored.
So I'm going to put my house on the market when the lockdown ceases, because it's never been better.
Tired of looking at it, right?
So anyway, listen, Colin, thank you so much for your time. It's been great chatting. And hopefully we'll get to sort of meet up in person soon and share a glass of wine or a beer or whatever you're into.
Well, Sarah, thank you. I might even have two.
Okay, me too. You're in good company. All right.
Can't wait.
Great to talk.
Thanks.
Bye.